There are a few questions I often get asked. What is it like working with my parents, especially when I'm technically their boss? Why was I willing to have my parents come and work with me in the first place? Why did I start this podcast? As well as why are we as a family so passionate about serving Newberg? So in this episode, I've invited my parents, John and Karen Roberts, to not just answer questions, but also to ask me some questions, which could be dangerous, but we'll see. For those of you who don't know, Karen joined my real estate team in 2019 and came from working in senior living and is now a seniors real estate specialist. She's an ambassador for the Chamber of Commerce and also is the upcoming president for the Newberg New and Rotary Club. John joined at the beginning of 2023 after a career in engineering, construction, quality assurance, and operations, though not all at the same time. He's the president of the Chamber of Commerce ambassador team. He's on the leadership team of the Morning Rotary Club and holds other leadership roles in the community. So in this episode, we're going to be sharing why we believe family is so important, what makes Newberg special, and why we think it's so important to take initiative and get involved. I'm Daniel Roberts. This is the Giving Town podcast, and we're getting started right now. All right, Mom, Dad, thanks for joining me today on the Giving Town podcast. It's fun to have you both here.
Oh, it's good to be here, Daniel. Thanks for inviting us.
Yeah, thanks, Daniel.
Yeah, I know you kind of have to do what I say anyway. So, well, people often ask me what it's like working with my parents, especially when I'm the managing broker for our team. So it'll be fun to talk about that a little bit. Also, I know people hear about the podcast and the other things just because of my involvement around town. I'm a little more visible, but there's a lot that you guys both do around town too. So it'll be fun to get to share with the community the things that you guys do and how you're involved as well.
Well, I've been looking forward to doing this. I mean, I'm sure a lot of your listeners probably don't know the history of the podcast and, why you do it. So it'll be fun talking about that. You're usually the one asking the questions, so it'll be fun to turn the tables a bit and let you answer a few.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes.
And it is awesome being involved in such a great community. I think that's one of the things we have fun with together, too, is all of us being in Rotary and all the other connections. It's a nice community to be part of.
Well, I feel really blessed and fortunate to get to work with you guys. Not everyone works with family, and I guess some people are really grateful for that. But, it's a rare opportunity, and I think we kind of take a unique approach to kind of what we do, not to just pat ourselves on the back. But it's been interesting. I mean, we'll get into some of that and kind of how you guys raised me and I guess us kids. I guess we're not kids anymore. But yeah, it'll be fun. It'll be fun to talk about, and I'm sure some of the things we talk about we'll already know, and some of the things we may not know. So I'm kind of nervous and excited at the same time. So yeah, if you guys ready?
Yeah, let's do it. So, Daniel, you were 4 years old when we moved to Oregon from Missouri. We lived in the Dalles, and you grew up in the Gorge. How did you end up in Newberg?
It was really, I remember, I think it was sophomore year in high school. Sarah, who's my older sister, I mean, you guys know that obviously, but for the listeners. So she went to George Fox. She was 2 years ahead of me, and we had a close relationship, and I decided, you know what, if she's going to school there, it's probably a good school, and I might as well go as well. And I, at the time, wanted to be an engineer, and so I found they had an engineering program. So I decided to go. And really, ever since coming to Newberg, so that was in 2011, it's about 13 years ago, I pretty much immediately knew that it was my new home, and I just kind of didn't want to go back to the Dalles. Yeah, and that's where I met Cassie too. So my wife, we met at George Fox and raised our kids here, and just kind of felt that's where we both wanted to call home.
Yeah, and Cassie's a keeper for sure. So you got your degree in mechanical engineering, and so you could become a real estate agent. Yeah. How'd you move from engineering to real estate?
Doesn't everyone go to engineering school to be a realtor? It's interesting because I loved engineering. In a lot of ways, my brain just kind of worked that way. I was kind of good at math, although when I got to college, I realized how actually not good at math I was. But honestly, how I got through engineering school, they made friends with the smart kids, and they kind of helped me with my homework, and I really just liked people. I usually took the role of like project manager rather than the one doing all the data stuff, and I liked presenting, I liked public speaking, and I kind of had a hint that I wanted to do something sales related, and I didn't really know what that was. But after losing a job, and I had actually a few different jobs in engineering, and kind of realized, you know what, I think I want to do something more people oriented. So I had a friend who had a real estate company, and he invited me and said, "Hey, you have a pulse. Why don't you come?" No, but he said, you know, you'd be good at this, and I really didn't know what I was getting into. So, yeah, I tried it, and it was hard at first, but I I got into it, and it's been a journey from there. So that was in 2017. So about from now, I guess, just over 6 years ago.
You know, one of the things I like getting into real estate, you were choosing a very unique name. You know, once you launched on your, by yourself, share how you came up with that name, because everybody asks about it all the time.
Oh, with the Joyful Roberts
The
Group?
Joyful Roberts Group, yeah.
Well, yeah, so it's something that I realized I haven't shared much with people just because it doesn't come up that often. So when I got into real estate, it was literally a month before my wife and before Cassie and I got married. That was when I lost a job, and then said, "Hey, I'm going to get into real estate," and we got pregnant right away. So she was a preschool teacher at the time. And I said, well, hey, why don't you also get your license and join me? And it'll be, while our son's napping or while he's sitting on your lap, you can just work. And little did we realize how energetic he would be. Anyway, that's kind of another story. But she got her license, and we actually, until 2020, Cassie was a licensed real estate agent. But before she got into real estate, she started a blog called The Joyful Roberts, and it was her journey through anxiety, talking about, even before we got married, like as we were saying, okay, we're going to be the Roberts, we should have like a family email, and it was The Joyful Roberts at gmail.com if anyone wants to send us an email and tell us how much they like us. So anyway, but that was her email. She had a blog about that. And then when we got into real estate, we said, well, we should just call ourselves The Joyful Roberts Group. And then that was, I guess that was how that happened. But really from the real estate side, the reason we decided that is really everything we do, even though it's helping people find homes, what we really care about is helping people find joy in life. And that was, her blog was about helping people find joy. And the reason we kept that name, even though she's not doing the blog as much anymore, but on the real estate side, there's a lot of stress that can happen in real estate. So being able to help people find joy in that is really fun. And we just like to have fun. I mean, all of us, we like to laugh. We like to just see things kind of lighthearted or bring joy to situations.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So what about this, the Giving Town podcast? How did that originate?
Well, I mean, that's what everyone does. You go into real estate and you start a completely unrelated podcast, right? When I first got into real estate, one of the things I've always loved was helping nonprofits, like getting involved, serving, and with the podcast, I actually had no intention to start a podcast. I just liked telling people about the different nonprofits I volunteered at or donated to, that kind of thing. And one of my friends at one of those nonprofits said, hey, you really like telling people about like the stories of these nonprofits. Like, what if you started a podcast and I'll help you? Because he had a bunch of like music and sound production experience. And it was really good, actually. And I said, yeah, that sounds great. He's like, I'll do all the producing. You just record the episode and then give it to me. And so we recorded our first episode, and then before it was published and kind of halfway through working on it, he's like, hey, I actually got a job in Hawaii. Sorry. And I won't be able to work on it. So he's like, oh yeah, I'll do it. Yeah, at first he thought he was going to be able to help, and it just didn't work out. So I realized, I either scrap all of this, scrap the episode and everything and the whole idea, or I learn how to do it myself. So I spent a lot of time, actually way too much time, learning the whole podcast field, and eventually just said, I'm going to have to just produce this at a much lower quality, which I did. If you listen to the first episodes, at the time it was actually called the Elpies Project. So it wasn't the Giving Town.
Yeah.
We actually lived up in Beaverton at the time. the Elpis project, and that just means hope. Elpis is hope in Greek. And I got that from in 1 Corinthians 13 in the Bible. There's a verse that says these things remain: faith, hope, and love. And that hope word is Elpis. And so I wanted it to be a project that was sharing hope. And that's still the theme of this podcast, sharing stories of hope and generosity, but specifically in Newberg. So when we came back to Newberg, which is another story, but in 2019, we kind of came back home, and I knew I wanted to start again, but with a focus on Newberg. And it took a while because I was in the middle of the real estate business, but eventually started the podcast again and then rebranded to the Givingtown podcast in 2021 because no one knew what Elpis meant. They thought it was like Elpis. Some people thought it was Elvis. They thought it was like, a project talking about Elvis Presley. And I was like, I think I need to change the name. But that's how it started. And it is completely separate in many ways from real estate. But it's kind of a passion project in mine. And I just really enjoy sharing, especially in Newberg. I mean, the name, the Giving Town, this is a very giving and generous town. So I like being able to tell people about all the cool things happening in town.
Yeah.
And I should say, because I have a separate Living in Newberg YouTube channel. People get them confused. There's the Giving Town podcast, which is about like nonprofits, that kind of thing. And so this is kind of more like all the positive, like hope-filled stories. And then we'll kind of get into what the YouTube channel is about, I'm sure, in a little bit.
Okay. So then you came back. So I've kind of lost track. You changed from Elpis to the Giving Town because you were getting involved in Newberg already. I mean, what prompted you to get so involved in the community?
Yeah. So when I first got into real estate, I realized that, you have to find a way. Well, actually, I got into real estate, and then when we moved back to Newberg, I realized I didn't really know anyone. It was actually Dennis Lewis who recommended to me that, like, hey, you should get involved in service clubs and organizations. One, because it's important to serve the community you're in, and that's a great way to get to know people. So that's what I did. I honestly credit a lot of that to him. And so I've also always loved serving. Even when I was still in engineering, I liked finding ways to get involved and volunteer and that kind of thing. But it's kind of interesting because it's also in some ways kind of following the model you guys gave me. I know growing up, you guys were always the party house. You were always finding ways to help people. There were like 2 or 3 different occasions where we had families come in and live with us because they didn't have, they ran into trouble. So, I mean, that's part of it, is just realizing that I've been given a lot of opportunity in life, and I kind of feel it's a sense of responsibility to also give and kind of give back in that way. And so what's interesting is now that you guys have joined, it's been fun seeing you get involved in the community as well, and realizing it kind of just, it kind of runs in the family. I think a lot of people just don't take the initiative or always think someone else is going to do it. In psychology, there's this phrase called diffusion of responsibility, which means when there's a lot of people who could do something, very few people will see it as their own responsibility. And so I think as a family, we just always said, like, it is our responsibility. Like, no, because we understand very few people are going to, like, we just need to be the ones to do it. So I guess a question I would have for you is, you taught that to us growing up, but where do you think you picked that up?
Well, I definitely know it probably goes so far back with me that it just seems to be part of how I always felt. It was really hard seeing people suffering and not doing something about it. So that was probably a big motivation in helping people in the situations you remember growing up. It was like there was a need and I could help. I think we have a similar story of when we moved here and then COVID hit, and people invited us to join some organizations. They actually became our first friends. It was spectacular. So in Rotary, we had this business-to-business meeting, and it was just a great opportunity to meet friends. So I think that our hearts were wanting to help, but this was a town where so many people were wanting to help. You were building friendships so easily, and I love that. So,
I think for me, it's, I'm a process oriented person, and I like to, I guess, take part in the process, and so I like to get involved. And you mentioned initiative. I just enjoy being able to be involved in a planning stage of something, or just led several organizations. So it's just been fun. I don't know.
Yeah, well, growing up, because you were always finding ways to get involved, even though it was less. It was probably more in church, less in a community. So you were, I think, I'm trying to remember all that you did. I know you kind of led the men's ministry, and you kind of always stepped up. And so I think just seeing that model, just how you would see a need and you'd fill a need and step in. And I think people think it's harder than it is. Mm-hmm. People think that, you have to have a certain amount of time, or you have to have a certain education or whatever. But one thing that I don't always, but I would like to encourage people more, is it's much easier to step in to any group and just kind of start getting involved and take positions of leadership, decide to be a leader first. And when you realize, when you take that attitude of I'm going to lead whether or not I have a position and volunteer, then people will see that and naturally want you to take on more leadership.
Right.
So it's much easier than people think.
Yeah, I think so. And, and it's been, maybe we've had an advantage. You were already here and somewhat involved. So having family here already made it in some ways easier. But I think you're right. It is easy to get involved.
Well, it's super rewarding. I mean, why we're doing it, part of it is helping people, but there's, it's a really true saying, give and you will receive. So I think the part, we know that as the truth, but I think there's, some people might not have had the opportunity to test it and see, so it's anything we're doing like that is just so rewarding. And everyone we're with, like in Rotary, and other organizations, everyone's mindset, I think, is like that. It's super rewarding.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So talking about family. So I've had a lot of people comment to me that they could never work with family. And they wonder what it's like for us. I mean, I love it, but I was wondering what made you, when you moved here, you asked Mom to join you in 2019, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, kind of like I mentioned earlier, that even what brought me to Newberg in the first place was the fact that I had a close relationship with Sarah, my sister, and you were pretty adamant, even from a young age, how we talked to each other, how we talked to you guys as parents. And I specifically remember one time you mentioned hey, I know a lot of your friends probably, talk behind their parents' backs to you, but you made it very clear that that's not how you're going to do things. You will always speak respectfully of us. And I thought that was interesting. Looking back, I'm if it weren't for that, I don't know what that I would have thought, even to tell our kids that as they get older. But I think the respect was kind of instilled, and that relationship was there. I felt safe being able to talk to you guys about things. And I think through parenting, I was the youngest. So I think you kind of learned a few things along the way. And so I felt comfortable being able to be family and work together. I knew we had a good enough relationship. But, at the time, so when I invited Mom to join in 2019, so Cassie was helping me at the time. And so you guys were still in the Dalles. Mm-hmm. I had just closed a deal out in the Dalles, so we'd come and visit you guys. But that's a 2.5 hour drive.
Right.
So 2.5 hours of going and doing a showing, and that was really hard. And I said to Mom, who's you're working at the Springs and the Springs Seniors Living.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, hey, you're that's one of the things too. You're always kind, you're always caring. And I thought you'd be a great person to be in real estate, and in the Dalles, you could help with the clients over there. So that was kind of the plan, is that Mom was going to help with clients in the Dalles. But then you guys ended up moving to Newberg before that could happen anyway. But I think the reason I was willing to is just, I just saw the attitude that mom had. I mean, even at the Springs, like getting awarded, like, what was it, like Employee of the Year at what was that?
You
The Jillian
know, Lillian.
Lillian Award.
Yeah.
Yes, sorry. Yes,
Which was based, I mean,
it was Fee's grandmother. So it was,
The founder of the
but what was it?
it was a way of honoring employees who went above and beyond.
Okay. And yeah, so like just that, like you see a need, you fill it, you get things done.
Yeah.
And so I just thought like, well, hey, I know your character is good, and I didn't have to worry about like, not being able to trust you in that sense. So yeah, I knew that people would enjoy working with her.
Yeah, and you brought up something earlier. One of the things I think that helps us as a family work together is when you were younger, we always encouraged you to talk about how your opinion of how Dad and I were getting along. We let you speak into our relationship, and I don't know how many parents let their kids do that, but we knew we had a few things to learn, and they say out of the mouth of babes comes wisdom. Well, anyways, we wanted to give the we wanted us as a family to be able to communicate, even when things were, awkward and hard and all that. And I think that gave you place the rest of your life to be able to share hard things. So I think we've just been really transparent with each other. But it's been great working with you. I think it's probably the hardest job I've had, in the sense that real estate is extremely difficult. In the learning curve, you're
a learning cliff.
Yeah, learning cliff. Yeah, I'm not sure which way the cliff is going or where I'm at on the cliff. Yeah, but when we came to Newberg and had the opportunity to be here, that was probably one of the most fulfilling things here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it kind of threw my plans for a loop. Like my plan was for you guys to stay in the Dalles.
Surprise.
Yeah, so I guess briefly share what brought you over to Newberg.
Well, like as you were saying, you were following Sarah. We were kind of following Sarah too.
Nothing personal.
Nothing personal. No. Well, I ask people, I say, when you drove into Newberg for the first time, people who are moving here, I ask them, could you feel the difference of this community? Because when we came here, I sure could. It was drastically different than any other community I had gone into. And maybe that was just some, spiritual encounter people would say I was having. I'm not sure. But it took over 10 years for us to finally move here. And that was when John got an opportunity in McMinnville. Up until then, I would say, can we move to Newberg? And he would say, how are we going to do this?
Yeah, I always joke that it was once Sarah had kids. So it's like we had grandkids. That wasn't enough. When she had grandkids, that was,
yeah.
or when she had kids.
Yep, yeah.
But I know it had to do with the job. Well, and the funny thing is, so you guys came over here, and Dad was working in kind of at quality engineering or quality assurance. I always get that mixed up, and kind of
quality assurance, yeah.
In operations, that type of role. And so I realized as a team that was something that we could really use. And so I was always like, hey, Dad, why don't you get your license and do some consulting for us? Because Mom and I could really use the help. And then you finally did.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because, like Mom was saying, that when Sarah came to school here in 2009, I guess, and so from day one, she was wanting to move here, and we finally got here, and then it's like, now it's an opportunity to get into real estate. But I had some reservations when we finally made a decision to do it, because the concern of family working together, like we talked about, but one of the things that I had realized was my whole career, I'd never been able to connect with the community that I was living in, because I was working in a different community, and I was in management and had relationships with my staff and coworkers, but never with my hometown.
So what do you think made you, you had reservations, you had like the dynamic you mentioned. So, I mean, was it just that, or were there other things that made you decide to get into real estate?
Well, I mean, there was a couple of things going on. One was, it was post-COVID, and there was a lot of volatility in manufacturing, especially in aerospace manufacturing. But I started thinking about, seeing you and Mom working together. I mean, there was a lot of involvement in the community, so that was very appealing to me. And I started thinking about, I have experience in real estate already, just not formally. I mean, Mom and I together bought and sold several properties. We were landlords. I was a licensed building contractor in Oregon and Washington, and done some land development. So I already had been in and around real estate for a long time, and it was just kind of that final push when the company I was working for just kind of started going south and had a big downturn in business. Revenue really dropped. And I thought, okay, this is it. Let's do this.
Well, and it's been great having you, because one of the things, even though it was great working with Mom, having her on the team, it really tested our relationship. So I would, for people who are like, oh, should I work with family? You really have to have a good relationship, because there were times that we were, I mean, not that a relationship is bad, but there's definitely a lot of tension. I'm very much like a shoot from the hip type of person. I'll just jump into something and work. And for Mom, there was very much not that. She wanted hey, I need you to show me exactly what to do. And now just kind of throw her to the wolves and do trial by fire over and over again, and say no, you need to learn this on your own. And to her, that was kind of slap in the face.
Oh, so that was the part where I felt I was falling off the cliff.
Yeah.
Well, that's part of what I saw was that dynamic, and it wasn't.
You're like, I don't want to get into that.
Oh, please come join the fun. Yeah.
Well,
but what's been interesting? So there, some people listening might know the name Jeff Vandenhoek. So he was someone I was a part of a group called Impact Pros with, and he shared a concept from a book called Working Genius, and they use this acronym called WIDGET. And basically, it's kind of a personality profile, but instead of personality, it's more of how do you work on a team together with someone? What part of a project are you best at? And anyway, so there's wonder, I think ideation, discernment, galvanizing. Without getting into what they all mean, we found that we all had two of those that we were good at and two that we weren't. And Mom and I shared certain things really well, but getting the process down and getting things across the finish line was really hard, because we both kind of wanted the other person to do it. It was neither of our strengths of getting things finalized and done. And what we found is you kind of completed that puzzle, almost like a stool that had two legs but not a third one. And one of the things I think we found is that together we really complement each other really well. So that's been really exciting for me, and having you just being able to take our process to the next level has been awesome.
Oh, and it has. Yeah, it's I've been in awe watching just how our team has changed, because those were the things that were missing. We really needed, we would start the processes that were really good, but they needed to be continually refined. I mean, that just is a business. Probably anyone who owns their own business is going to know what we're talking about. You're continually growing and changing, and you've been amazing at that. So now having, I had hesitations too in the beginning, but now you're my go-to all the time, especially. Yeah, you're easy to get a hold of.
Well, it's nice you guys live together, so you're much more available.
Oh, well, thank you. Let's switch gears a little bit. So in addition to the podcast, you also started the YouTube channel called Living in Newberg.
In all this free time.
Yeah, I mean, as if this wasn't all enough. How'd that start?
Well, gosh, when was that? I've always been kind of one of those weird people. I didn't mind being on camera, even if I was terrible at it. I was willing to try. And so I sing in choir for multiple years, and I found that if you can sing in front of someone, then you can be a public speaker, because I can say when I talk, which I shouldn't, but I do. And when you're on stage, you have to get every note and every word right, because if you're singing a song and you say it doesn't sound very good. And so I just learned being just like putting yourself out there, learning to make mistakes. So I started out on Facebook Live and then realized like, I want to be able to reach people in a different way. We wanted to do YouTube. This is Cassie and I both doing this. We wanted to do something that like people could actually search and like find ways to teach people about the community. And just, people always say video is where you need to be. So that's kind of the like real estate equivalent of the giving town. Like the giving town is, like I mentioned earlier, focused on more like nonprofits, like people doing good things in the community. Living in Newberg is for anyone living in the community or moving here. Just what is it like living here? So like what are cool like amenities around town? What are events going on? Sometimes I talk about the real estate market, like what's the market going to be doing, things like that. So it's just kind of like helping people get to know the town better in general. There's a lot of times where there is some crossover and I haven't quite figured that out. And I'm like, should I combine them? But they're separate enough where I haven't. But anyway, so that's kind of how it started. I was terrible at first. Mom and I were recently doing a video about seniors because with Mom being a seniors real estate specialist, I thought like, it makes sense to have her involved and talk about what there is to do for seniors around town. And it was just like, it's a struggle being on, I don't know if you want to talk to that at all, maybe not.
No, I think you're doing really good, Daniel. Yeah. It's fun hearing your side of this.
It's really hard being on video if you haven't done it before. And so like Mom was like, gosh, like how do you make this look so easy? So I found a video from me, like the very first one, one of the first ones I did talking about, what was it? Inspections. Like, this is why you should have this is why you should have a real estate. No, like an inspection. And it was like, it was so bad. Like it was right when COVID started. I seriously looked like I had it. Like I looked like I was sick. I was like I was pale. I couldn't figure out my words. And I was like, no, it's not that I'm a natural. I've just done a lot of videos.
We were crying. We were laughing so hard because it was so bad. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah. You need to look that one up.
Yeah. And so eventually living in Newberg, there's other channels like called Living in Portland, there's a person who kind of like came up with that name. And so I decided to be the person of Newberg so that when people like are wondering about living in Newberg, the channel just made more sense. So rather than just being like a YouTube channel about us, like, hey, look how great the Joyful Roberts is and this is what we do, because no one is really searching that. Like people moving to Newberg don't want to know, what do you do to help your sellers or buyers? They want to know like, okay, is this a good town to move to? Like, what are the pros and cons? Like, honestly, what are the different things around town? So that's kind of why we changed that name. So yeah, that's
okay. So what's your favorite part of doing this?
Yeah, it's been interesting. I'm one of those kind of eternally optimistic people. I always like have really grand visions, and it can be hard to follow through sometimes. So I think I'm glad that I've stuck with it because the growth was really slow at first, and there are a lot of points of frustration. But I think what I've really enjoyed, honestly, both with the podcast and with the YouTube channel, is I've gotten to talk to some pretty cool people. I mean, just last week we got a chance, or I guess last week when we're recording this, I got a chance to talk to Russ Thomas and did a tour around the wastewater treatment plant. And so it's just kind of like, it allows me to build cool relationships that probably without it, I wouldn't be able to. And, but for the podcast, my favorite part is really like, how do I'm always talking about like hope, like all the good things there are in the community. But when I get to talk to people on a regular basis who are doing really cool things, it really encourages me and helps me kind of stay positive and hopeful, because I'm kind of aware of all the good things happening. Yeah.
Well, yeah. And one of the really neat things about that, Daniel, is when I'm sharing with people about, living in Newberg, or, whether it's YouTube or the podcast, is it's a great way to meet somebody, because you think about our superintendent or the city manager, they don't have an hour to spend with everybody, but they, people can watch the podcast and get to know the person and know some of the big things that are going on in town, especially, they got kids in school, or, they're looking at investing in the community. It's such a nice opportunity.
Yeah.
So here's what this is fun being the interviewer. So I hear you ask your guest this question: what motivates you? How would you answer that?
Yeah, I think for which one?
What motivates you?
Well, I guess my kids and having to have my parents try to tell me what to do, even though I'm their managing broker. But no. I mean, I guess it depends on the context. I'd say for the pod. Well, I guess I'll start from the business side. What motivates me is really I like helping people. Like we talked about that. I like helping people and knowing that I made a difference in someone's life. And I think that's probably a big reason why I started this is I was kind of wondering, like, gosh, like I feel like there should already be something like this, like a podcast that shares about all the amazing things in a community, and there wasn't. And so I knew I had an opportunity to make an impact, and knowing that I could do that and share stories and that people, it could encourage people and kind of help kind of affirm the culture of the town. I wouldn't say like shape it because I'm just sharing what's already happening, but that's what really motivating for me. And I guess with that is knowing that there's a lot of people who live here who don't know how many amazing things are happening in the community. And so being able, like knowing that I have a chance to get the word out of people who don't, they're busy doing the work. Mm-hmm. They don't have time to get it out to everyone in a regular, like they have newsletters and stuff, but I think this is a way that's kind of, in a sense, like agnostic to the actual organization. So it kind of attracts the people who just want to hear like the good things happening or who are curious about the town. So that's been motivating for me. I think another thing is as real estate agents, specifically with, I mean, being ambassadors with the Chamber of Commerce and being in Rotary and all the different things that we do, we're kind of the like welcoming committee to the town.
Yeah.
And both with this podcast and living in Newberg, like a lot of people see that when they come to town. So knowing that we have the opportunity not only to be just like help people move here, but we have an opportunity to be the first part of the town that people see.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what kind of fun is like. There's a sense of responsibility that comes with that because, you know, if the first people that someone meets when they come to town are rude or mean, they kind of have that impression of the town.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Whereas if they meet someone that's like kind and joyful and fun to be around, then they'll have a good impression. So I really like Newberg. I really like helping people see that it's a cool community. So I'd say that's probably a big aspect of what motivates me.
Okay. So where do you see this going? What are you hoping this will lead to?
You know, Brian Groves, for those of you who don't know Brian, we did an interview a while back about United as Neighbors, which is essentially kind of getting a lot of the organizations together who want to promote like civility and being kind to each other. Especially like this is back when a lot of the major division was happening with like the school board and elections and stuff. But he made a comment about like, what if Newberg could be the town that people look to? Like when there's division in a community, like how does a community heal and come back together and treat each other well? And that really spoke to me. Like, what if through whatever I'm doing with this, like this could become a model for other communities to say like, hey, how can we do this? How can we look at Newberg to be a town that like, you know, be a town like Newberg that like people come together and are always finding ways to help their neighbors or to give and be generous. And honestly, it's kind of like a reverse propaganda. Like sometimes it's easy to share the negative news stories. But by sharing these stories, want to help people see like, no, like Newberg is actually a really great town. Like there's a lot of amazing people here.
Yeah.
Let's focus on that. And honestly, like if you want to fit in as someone who lives in Newberg, like this is kind of the expectation. Like you're going to treat people well. You're going to like put others first. You're going to have like a service attitude and just find ways to take care of each other. Mm-hmm. And so like when someone comes to town and they look around and say like, what is this town like? What do I need to do to fit in? And if they see kind of through listening to the podcast and as other people kind of begin to live this out, they see like, oh, like I guess this is how people are. And like, what does it mean to be a good neighbor? Like, I think we all have a long ways to go with that. And being less individualistic and more community minded. So that's kind of where I see this going. Newberg could kind of be like a shining example for the rest of, honestly, like the rest of the nation. That'd be kind of my dream.
Oh, that's great. No, that's part of, you know, speaking of Brian, I mean, the United as Neighbors, I get to serve with him on that organization, and it's great because that's one of our focuses is, uniting, staying united as neighbors.
Yeah. One of the things that I was kind of talking about being involved in Newberg, but for you guys, I mean, you're both in Rotary, you're on leadership of Rotary, Dad, Mom, you're going to be president next year, you're, head of the ambassador team for Chamber. Like, what do you think gives you guys the desire to do that as well? I mean, maybe not do that as well, but like you also are like, hey, like Newberg is great. We want to do our part. What do you think gives you that desire?
You go ahead.
Well, I get to hang around with great people. I mean, it's cream of the crop. People who have that kind of heart, who are in serving people, are just great people to be with.
It's pretty selfish.
It is. It's very selfish. Well, when you're with good people, you can do good things. I mean, it kind of, yeah. Well, there's the heart, though. Huh?
Yeah, we're all selfish. You just want to be around people who are amazing. Yeah.
Well, I've found that. I mean, we were talking about the joy, our name, the Joyful Roberts, but people here seems like they do really enjoy life and want to have fun. And, I've always been one, we joke around a lot, and it seems like people just have good senses of humor and get along well. I enjoy being a part of that. And because for me, as I mentioned before, I had never really had an opportunity to connect with the community I lived in. And this has just been a breath of fresh air for me, honestly, to be able to get involved. And I love it.
So last question, I guess, for all of us, what gives you guys hope for the future of Newberg?
You want to answer first?
Well, it comes back to the people, kind of like, going back to Brian Groves and, having that kind of a dream. What if Newberg was the example? So you have enough people who think like that. There's much to be said when the right minds and the right hearts connect to make a difference. And I stay hopeful about that with Newberg, is that we are going to continue to grow to become an even better community than we are now.
Mm-hmm. One thing that stood out to me, you mentioned, Chamber ambassadors. There was a group of us ambassadors that went to Klamath Falls this year. And one thing that I noticed was there was a lot of, the other communities, other ambassadors from some of the other communities from around the state were talking about the division in, just like there were factions in their community, just, between city management, between the chamber, between, the tourism groups. Here, there's a lot of unity.
Yeah, there is.
There really is, and it really stands out. And that was, it's something I really noticed, and that gives me hope, because it's only going to get better. I mean, everybody I have met, they're just great people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I'd say kind of what gives me hope too, one, I get to do this. I get to talk to people who are doing amazing things all the time. So it's almost hard not to be hopeful about the future. But like you said, there's just so many people doing amazing things. The leadership, Will and the city manager and Scott with Chamber and
Mayor,
and Aubrey with Downtown Coalition, and what's the other part of the stable table? Oh, Lee Jensen, which Taste Newberg, Mayor Bill Rossecker. I mean, there's so many people that are really pulling together. And even when we disagree, I think more and more we're learning how to do that. I think people recognize the animosity doesn't do a whole lot. It doesn't help. Now we learn to, disagree and still be kind.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both for coming on today. It's been kind of fun. It's a definitely different experience getting asked questions as well.
Yeah.
But it was fun. I hope this has been helpful for the community too, to kind of get to learn a little bit about us and kind of who we are and how we work. But it's been, it's been a joy working with you guys, and I'm super blessed that even after working together for so long, we still love it. We still love each other, and it's something that I wish more people could experience.
Yeah, I agree.
Definitely. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you, Daniel.
It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you for tuning in to the Givingtown podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider sharing it with a friend who you think might benefit from hearing it. While more and more people are continuing to hear about this podcast, I still need your help to spread the message about all the people and organizations that make Newberg so great. Well, thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you in the next episode.